Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. Tonight we have 7 horror stories. I hope you all enjoy them. If you do, please be sure to drop a like rating. It only takes just a quick second and it helps out the channel so much. But again, of course, only drop a like if you feel this video is genuinely deserving of it. Subscribing if you are new is also very much appreciated. I post horror stories all of the time. Anyways, sit back, do whatever it is that you do to relax. And as always, I hope you all have a great night. I can't eat. That's the gist of it. I can't eat. I guess the people who haven't grown up the way I have, it sounds absurd. So much of our lives revolve around eating. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. It's a social ritual and contract, and without it we lose a core pillar of being human. But I can't eat. I can't be part of that. It's complicated. I grew up to a single mother with a minimum wage. How she managed to keep a sickly kid alive through all that is beyond me. And I don't mean sickly as in getting nasty colds or ear infections. I mean with a big S. For as long as I can remember, I could never eat solid food. Some doctors called it inoperable achalasia, but my mom called it royal throat. Just like the kings and queens of old, she used to say. They were so used to having servants feed them that they stopped eating for themselves. It was just a nice way for her to make it sound like I was special, rather than cursed. The main problem is that I can't swallow. So instead I have a puree my food and slide it down my throat with a thick plastic tube. I can't really taste anything and the whole ordeal can look uncomfortable to onlookers. So it's something I'm very private about. I can still taste and chew things, but a pleasant taste don't really outweigh the threat of choking to death. I can drink, but it takes some effort. If it gets too hot or cold, my throat just shuts down. Same if it's too sugary, too spicy, or too sweet. And since I can't swallow, I just tilt my head back and let it run down my throat. Mild apple juice is an occasional treat, but I like to stick to ordinary tap water. No fizzy stuff. Nothing that makes the muscles contract. Apart from that one thing, I was a normal kid. I still went trick-or-treating, and by the end of the night, I gave all my candy away to my friends. It made me bully-proof in a way. To them, I was weird, but it was the kind of weirdness that paid off. Whenever someone handed out candy, or fruit, or freebies, I passed mine along to those who treated me well. "You're like a truffle pig," my buddy Dawson used to say. "You get to sniff out all the good stuff, but you can't have any for yourself." And that's where the nickname started. Truffle Pig. I don't know if it's some kind of myth or urban legend, but it's said that truffle pigs can never be allowed to eat the truffles they're trained to find. If they do, they're useless. They get so preoccupied with finding truffles for themselves that there's nothing left. They get a taste for it and it's all over. I got the occasional jab and mean look about the nickname, but most of them said it with love. It wasn't mean-spirited. It went from Truffle Pig to Truffles to Ruffles to just Rough or Ruffy. And I guess that name stuck around ever since. I graduated from high school and got a job on a clam boat. Not a fancy job, but I've always loved the sea. I never get seasick or carsick or anything like that. Maybe a side effect from having a strange stomach. So when a spot opened, I was first in line. Did it for a summer as a practice run and got hired full-time a month later. Great pay, decent benefits. We usually worked on smaller vessels, inshore boats, smaller yields that could turn a surprising profit at the local seafood markets. Whatever we could get our hands on, we could sell at a huge markup. There wasn't a single Christmas where I didn't go home with a bonus. I'd end up being the designated driver whenever I went it out with the guys. They'd sometimes forget about my deal and bring me a beer or a scotch, and they'd end up getting an extra one. I'd stare at that bowl of spicy peanuts in the middle of the table and wonder what it'd be like to pig out on them, stuff my face full and go to town, to feel the crunch in my teeth, resonating in my jaw. But that'd send me straight to the hospital, or the morgue, a yellow building just down the street. Truffle Pig, Truffle Pig. Look, but don't taste. Mom passed when I was 27. It wasn't sudden or dramatic. It was the result of a lengthy battle coming to an end. I held a speech at her wake, divided her possessions among her living relatives, packed all her things in brand new cardboard from the tool shop, picking apart a careful knick-knack ecosystem where everything has a place, leaving only pale walls and dust bunnies. It's kind of funny, though. There was one picture of her and I from when I was just an infant. Back then I had brown eyes and hair. I thought it was someone else at first, seeing as how I now have my mother's blonde hair with green eyes. But there was a note on the back confirming that it was, in fact, our first picture together. I was offered a few days off work to get my affairs in order, but I declined. Stepping away from your routine underlines how painful the change is. By declining it, you're robbing it of its power. That's what I thought, at least. But when it rains, it pours. And maybe I was distracted that one morning in early May when I turned on to the interstate. I'd gone down that road 1,000 times, but just this once, I didn't pay attention. Maybe the other driver didn't either. Either way, the collision was violent. No one died, at least. They had to cut me out, but the other guy walked away without a scratch. They put me in a neck brace and took me to a hospital. Ran all kinds of tests. I had a fracture in my left leg, but apart from that, it just looked bad. Most of it was surface level stuff. They still did their due diligence though. X-rays, checkups, the whole shebang. I'd have to wear a cast on my leg, but apart from that, I'd be fine. I remember the final day before they sent me home. The doctor, a middle-aged Indian woman, went through my x-rays and talked at length about how lucky I'd been. In between instructions on how to keep my cast clean, I threw in a question. "What about my neck?" I asked. "Am I gonna have to change how I eat?" "No, that should be fine," she said. "Why do you ask?" "The achalasia," I said. "It's inoperable. Should be in my file." "Achalasia?" She looked at me for a couple of seconds, then back up at the x-ray. "You don't have achalasia." I went over it with her again and again. I told her I'd been diagnosed as an infant, that it had stuck with me all my life, that my throat was atrophied, and that I could only have pureed food pushed down my throat with a tube. Royal throat, like the kings and queens of old. "I don't know what you're referring to," she said, "but I don't know what to tell you. You don't have it. From what I can see, you've never had it." She pointed at the x-rays and explained how to recognize it, and that there were no signs of it in any way. I was perfectly fine. I just had to practice eating. "If you've been doing this for so long, chances are you'll never get quite used to it," she admitted. "But physically, there's nothing wrong. But it's gonna take some time adjusting to." I walked out of there on crutches, but I barely even paid attention to the leg. I couldn't believe it. All this time I could have just been like all the others. Someone must have misdiagnosed me, but there was nothing in my file suggesting there'd even been a conversation about achalasia in my past. In those files, I was perfectly healthy. Always had been. I couldn't make sense of it. There had to be a reason I'd lived the way I had. I decided I would go through my mother's things to see if there was a hint. I had boxes to go through a second time. Maybe I'd miss something. I got a ride from the hospital by my buddy Stevie. 40-something, father of 3, salt of the earth kind of guy. The kind of person who has a pickup and doesn't mind helping you move. 'Cause that's just what you're supposed to do. He must have noticed I was a bit quieter than usual. "Don't worry about work, Ruffy," he said. "Give it a couple weeks." "Thanks, but that ain't it," I said. "It's my throat." "Whiplash?" he asked. "Got an ache or something?" I explained to him what the doctor had said, that I was fine and always had been. I told him about the x-rays, how nothing showed, and how there was nothing in my files. Stevie got so caught up in the story that he almost missed a green light, making the guy behind us lean on the horn. Stevie snapped out of it and stepped on the gas. "That's messed up," he said, making a left turn. "But I mean, that's good news too." "I suppose, yeah." I was gonna have to get used to a new way of living, one where I could sit by the table and share a meal. I had a hard time wrapping my head around it. I was a bit scared. After all, what if I didn't like it? Could I just go back to pretending? But first, I had to give it a try. I couldn't just go trudging into a restaurant and order a ribeye. I had to try something small. I had Stevie drop me off at the supermarket. I bought some yogurt, cucumber, and chocolate ice cream. I asked him to join me in the kitchen. I figured it'd be best to have someone call for help if things went sideways. Like the doctor had said, even if I was physically okay, it'd take time getting used to the sensation. There aren't exactly any tutorials on how to eat. It's supposed to come naturally to us. It's not something you learn. We sat down at my kitchen table and I cracked open the yogurt. Stevie had a Coke. I didn't have any cutlery, so I had to grab a teaspoon from my mom's kitchen box. I dipped it in the yogurt, picked it up, and observed. My heart was beating out of my chest. "You alright?" Stevie asked. "Nervous." "Just try a little," he smiled. "Try to enjoy it." So I tried it. I let my tongue soak in the soft vanilla and acidic tang. I took a deep breath, leaned back, and just tried. I almost choked as my throat muscles cramped up, but it went well enough. It was wildly uncomfortable, though. I coughed a little, but held up a hand to show Stevie I was okay. I tried a little more and then some ice cream. It was difficult, and I could feel an ache in my throat. I was flexing muscles I'd hardly ever used. Over a painstakingly slow hour, I tried little bits and pieces of things. I was getting used to it, slowly but surely. I had to stop when I got to the cucumber, though. I cut it up and tried eating it like a mush, but part of the skin got stuck in the back of my throat. I ended up having a coughing fit. Stevie had to give me a couple back slaps. We decided to pause for the day, but it was promising. I was feeling something I hadn't felt before. It was a new experience, and I was getting better at it. "Give it a month," said Stevie. "By the time that leg cast is off, you'll be a brand new person." Over the next few days, I was stuck at home waiting for my leg to heal. Meanwhile, I took some time going through my mom's stuff. Everything from old phone books to photo albums. There were a lot of baby pictures, but they weren't in a particular order. In most of them I had blonde hair and green eyes, but there were a couple where it was still a clear brown. I could see a couple of things change in my mom, too. Her hair getting longer, the marks under her eyes growing deeper. But there were other things, too. There was this one picture where she was breastfeeding me, and another shortly after where she used a bottle. There was also one where she'd been in some sort of accident, wearing a bandage that reached up to her shoulder. All the while I was microdosing on food, little pieces of ice cream and yogurt, mashed potatoes and gravy, a strawberry sorbet. It took some time to get my throat moving, but after just a couple of days I could swallow with little to no problem. The first solid food I ate was a salty peanut. I bit down and chewed it for so long that my jaw ached, and when I finally swallowed, I could feel a tingle in my neck, like little puzzle pieces falling into place. I was so relieved I could cry. I ended up eating a whole bag, letting a rerun of Friends echo in the background, but all I could hear was the sweet crunch of peanuts breaking against my perfect enamel. It was such a filling sensation. Flavor, texture, mouthfeel, and with it all the realization that I had so much more to experience. It was euphoric. I wanted to save the first time I had a big dinner for a special occasion with my work friends. Not just Stevie, but the whole crew. My cast was still healing, so I had some issues getting around, but that wasn't gonna stop me from having a fantastic night. A proper steak dinner, a shrimp cocktail, garlic bread. I didn't hold back. I think my colleagues could feel the change in the air as they all got equally excited to order. We had some drinks, made some jokes, and left all the pretense at the door. Just guys being guys. As soon as I dug into my shrimp cocktail, I could feel something. There was this rush of energy, like an electric surge. I could feel my pupils growing larger, and I couldn't close my eyes. My breathing grew shallow and my pulse wouldn't stop rising. It's like I was on some kind of drug or fighting for my life. I thought I might be having an allergic reaction, so I had to stop myself and do a mental check. I felt fine. I was fine. Great, actually. The moment my steak arrived, the others raised a glass. To good food, Stevie said, and good friends. The others echoed the sentiment, but before they got to good friends, I'd sunk my teeth into the steak. I could feel the juices soaking into my teeth. It's difficult to describe the sensation. It's like I didn't just eat a steak. I could hear the bovine death cry in the back of my head. I could feel myself growling as a predator, sinking my teeth in like a prowling tiger. I daydreamed with open eyes, watching the red of the meat pulse with an invisible heartbeat. And somewhere in the distance, I could hear Stevie say something, but I couldn't make out the words. I bit down hard and tore away. My teeth ached as if they were pushing themselves out of my mouth, reaching for more meat. And with every passing second, the restaurant faded away until something cold splashed across my face. I was lying on the floor. My work friends were standing in a circle around me. One of the waiters called an ambulance. My hands were covered in grease. I'd grabbed the steak right off the plate with my bare hands. There were bite marks on my forearm, deep ones, still bleeding. I had to get my arm stitched up. According to Stevie, I'd gone completely feral. I'd torn that steak up, reached across to Luke's pork chop and grabbed that too. When I couldn't immediately grab more meat, I'd fallen to the floor, biting my own arm like I was trying to subdue a prey animal. They'd never seen anything like it. Some kind of episode, Stevie said. We're worried about you. Doctors didn't know what to make of it. Some kind of chemical imbalance from a sudden shift in diet, combined with stress and physical recovery. It didn't help that I'd been drinking. Not much, mind you, but enough for it to affect me. They couldn't point to a single instigating factor, and instead prescribed me a kind of anti-anxiety medication. They were just throwing darts at the wall at that point. Coming home, I noticed something peculiar. There was a crack in the side of my cast. I'd just been at the hospital, and it had been fine, so it must have happened recently. I thought about going back there, but I flexed my leg a little, and it felt fine, and in a couple of minutes the whole cast peeled off. My leg was healed. Now, I'm no doctor, but I couldn't feel anything wrong with it. I could put pressure on it, walk, flex my foot, not even a hint of pain. The only thing I could point out as being unusual was a strange skin growth on the left side of my thigh. At first I thought it was a long strand of hair, but it was too thick and covered in skin. Touching it didn't hurt, so I just broke it off and held it up. I got a little spot of blood from it, but nothing major. The thing was moving when I held it up, contracting over and over, like a dying insect. Or like the leg of a shrimp. I got a call from my boss the following morning. They insisted I took some time off, in accordance with my doctor. They were eager to have me back, but I had clearly not adapted to the new circumstances. It was a very diplomatic way of saying I was making people uncomfortable, and that they needed some time before they could forget that mental image of me gnawing on myself like a wild animal. But that just gave me more time to experience things on my own. I made a long list of things I was going to eat: pork, chicken, turkey, maybe something a bit more unusual like alligator, at least 3 kinds of fish, crab, and every kind of fruit I could find at the supermarket. Then again, fruit didn't excite me as much. There was just something about biting into meat that was way more satisfying. I enjoyed the taste of fruit and veggies, but there was something about the texture of meat that I couldn't make sense of. Then again, this was my first time experiencing food. There was no way for me to know this wasn't normal. When I got back from my shopping spree, I went to the bathroom to wash my hands. I noticed something in the bathroom mirror. My eyes looked different. The pupil looked rectangular. I figured it was a trick of the light, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. But I was too excited to care. I was gonna have a field day. So I washed my hands, splashed some water on my face, and hurried into the kitchen. At first, I was systematic, putting out little samples of things, bite-sized nuggets of meat, ready to be plopped down in a single gulp. I prepped a couple in the frying pan, others in the oven. I'd bought a new air fryer to try out some combos. I put on some music and had a blast. Everything was so rich, so succulent. Different textures, different flavors, and a world to discover. I could imagine the salty sea running between my fingers as I bit down on the crab meat. I could feel the texture of the feathers as I slurped up a slice of turkey. I adored it. Every last second of it. I spent close to 13 hours that way, just eating, eating, eating. The shops closed and opened, and I was first in line to get more. I must have looked like hell. That's what the look on the cashier's face said, at least. I would fall asleep at the dinner table, still holding my next piece of meat. A chicken wing, a tomahawk steak, an honest-to-God cheeseburger. I'd close my eyes and keep eating, dozing off between bites. It was heaven. Well, I didn't know it at the time. I kept that up for 49 hours total. I was in this meat-stained daze, not knowing what was happening around me. I'd missed calls and appointments, emails, bills to pay. I hadn't paid attention to any of it, and my systematic approach had completely fallen out the window. It was a marathon. When my kitchen ran empty, I lumbered to the bathroom. My stomach felt like wearing a backpack on the front, like an imbalance. I had to lean my arms against the wall to keep myself from tipping forward. I was scared to look in the bathroom mirror, but I did it anyway. The pupils of my eyes had gone horizontal. The skin of my left leg had hardened into a kind of shell. My teeth had grown long and jagged. My nails curled into claws, and throughout my hair I could find these long hollow tubes, like the growing feathers of a baby bird. My tongue was thick and discolored, my skin turning a reddish brown, with white milk-like spots. I just stared at myself, not grasping that this was a mirror. It showed me, but it wasn't me anymore. And when that realization hit, 2 thoughts struck me at once. One, that I was destroying myself, that this whole ordeal was what my mother had tried to avoid. Two, that I didn't want to stop. I needed to keep going. I went through my mother's things in between meals. It is hard to piece together a life after it's gone, but it's even harder when you think you already know what it looks like. But my mother's life was very different from what I imagined. Sure, my father was a mystery. There was no mention of him anywhere, except that they met at a punk concert back in the 90s. But she'd lived a very full life since then. She'd had friends, lovers, and plans of her own. But one thing stood out in particular: how I'd lost my brown hair and eyes. From what I could tell, she'd hurt herself in some way, and after that, I'd changed. It was around that time where I'd gone from breastfeeding to being bottle-fed. A thought hit me, an uncomfortable one. I thought back on what I'd done with that steak, and the way I'd torn into it. Could I have done something similar to my mother? Had I always been like this? I tried to find more answers, more pictures, more anything. All the while I ate. When I ran out of meat, I had the fruit. When I ran out of fruit, I had the veggies. Then the butter, the yogurt, the ice cubes in the back of the freezer. At one point, it was 3 a.m, and I was feverishly going through a photo album from my high school years. Nothing interesting, but I realized I didn't have anything left to eat. And yet, I was still chewing, looking down. I had started pulling out the buttons from the remote control and crunched them up like they were plastic cashews. I didn't care. I just had to eat. I gnawed on anything and everything: the leg of the kitchen table, the copper wire going to my bedside lamp. I smashed a wine glass on my cutting board and ground it up into something resembling salt and ate that too. I didn't feel a thing. It was just more texture. Wonderful, filling texture. I was in a daze. And the next time I looked myself in the mirror, I could barely comprehend it. When change happens rapidly and naturally, it is hard to notice. You don't really see it until you slow down long enough to care. If you've been running a marathon, you don't stop halfway through to weigh yourself. You wait until you're done. It was the same for me. I didn't realize the changes until I'd slowed down long enough to reflect on them. I wasn't human anymore. My hands had turned into this amalgamation of hoof and claw. My back was bent over with a fish-like ridge running along my spine. My eyes had 3 different colors, and one of them were coming out of the socket. If I concentrated, I could move it in and out, like the eye stalk of a crab. A couple of my teeth had turned to glass and ceramic. I could spot copper cables running under parts of my right bicep. Anything and everything I'd consumed with gusto had integrated into me, one way or another. I couldn't call for help. My fingerprint didn't register on my phone lock. I couldn't make words in my mouth to speak. I'd turned into a flesh prison. You are what you eat. I'd lose track of time. One day I'd have a tail dragging after me. Another I'd have a wing instead of an arm. My whole body was bubbling, like a boiling cauldron, shifting with every bite. But with nothing left to eat, it was devouring itself, eating the last parts of me that were human. I'd awakened a process that couldn't be stopped, and it would turn on itself instead of letting me starve. There was no one to call for help. I could barely close the blinds to my windows. I spent most of the time in the shower, drinking water straight from a busted pipe. I'd spend hours there, drinking, watching myself mutate. I could even affect it, in a way. Another finger, I'd think, and there'd be another finger. But it was getting harder to think, to comprehend, to put thoughts together in a way that made sense. Perhaps more things changed than I realized. After all, the brain is as much an organ as the heart, the throat, and the tongue. I'd lose long periods of time to a hazy blur. I remember snatching a bird off the windowsill and eating it whole, like popping a grape. I'd walk around gnawing on the curtains like they were long strands of spaghetti. But in a way, I knew I was losing myself. Whenever I had a moment of clarity, I could feel my heart sink into that empty pit in my stomach. I'm going away, I'd think. I'm losing myself. So with every fiber of my being, I grabbed a piece of paper, bit my finger and wrote in blood, "Stay human." It's difficult to describe the mind of an animal. A part of you disappears. You don't think about inconvenience or what ifs. You think about your next meal, where to sleep and where to get water. You don't care if you knock over a lamp or pull out a cable. It's just noise. I remember watching that paper, knowing it said something, but the symbols didn't mean anything. It turned from words to scribbles. At one point I mistook them for droppings and started to look for mice. Didn't find any. I didn't consider myself lost. I didn't consider anything. And for days I lumbered back and forth, turning my home into a nest. Then at some point the symbols made sense. A rare moment of clarity. Stay human. I knew it was temporary. A matter of minutes, maybe an hour. I had to think of a plan. Something. Anything that would make me stay human. Everything pointed to me taking on the properties of what I ate. So if I wanted to make myself human, there was only one solution. One grotesque, unthinkable solution. Now, I could find something tasteful in everything I ate. Anything from glass to copper to wood and bone. But having to eat human meat to find myself, that was a line too far. But what choice did I have? I made a plan. It was a long shot, but it was the only one I could think of. I could feel myself slipping, so I tried to remember 3 things. The color of the building I had to go to, the direction I had to move, and that there was meat there. Color, direction, meat. I repeated it like a mantra. I remember standing by the front door, pressing my head against the wood. I could hear someone taking their sweet time to lock up and leave in the hallway outside. "Please just go," I prayed. "You have to go." By the time they were gone, so was my mind. All that remained was color, direction, and meat. I made it outside. I followed the direction, looking for the color. A yellow building just down the street. I would run through the dense woods on all fours, thundering like a hoofed gorilla. I could feel my body changing to sustain the momentum, my arms growing heavy. I had to force myself to keep going, to stay focused on the task at hand. There were so many distractions. Cars in the distance, voices, bright lights casting shadows of potential prey. But I followed the direction in my mind, and I saw the building with the color, and I knew there'd be meat. I didn't even notice the locked door. I walked straight through it like it was made of paper. There was no guard there, thankfully. If I'd had the mind to read, I would have noticed the sign of County Morgue. I would know what the smell from the metal boxes meant. But in the mind of an animal, you don't care about the name of your prey. You don't give meaning to your actions. You just take what you want and make it your own. So that's what I did. I'm not going to go into detail. I can't. I remember every bite, but I can't bring myself to put it into words. A man who died from a heart attack. An older woman who'd broken her neck. I pulled them out and did what animals do. Meat, bone, organ. Later, the papers would say it was a bear. They weren't entirely wrong, I suppose. I lumbered home, dragging my bloated stomach through the woods. I'd feel my senses returning to me, a mind becoming human. But with that realization came understanding in what I'd done, and the searing emotional pain that ensued. I lay there among the berry bushes and the blue sunflowers outside my apartment complex, hoping no one would see me as I waited for an opportunity to go home. But honestly, at that moment, I think I rather would have died. So here we are, back at the start. Can't eat. My hair has grown out into a mix of black and gray, a combination of the two people missing from the morgue. My face still looks like my own. I guess that part was still buried somewhere deep in me. I'm a little taller and a little heavier, but my colleagues have chalked that up to a change in diet. I've gone back to an all puree lifestyle. That same old bottle pushing straight into my gut. I can't allow myself to be lost to sensation again. I treat myself to some fruit every now and then, and the occasional drink, but I don't eat full meals. I don't want to tempt fate any more than I already have. I'm back at my job, and I think I'm doing all right. People are looking at me like they always have. No one questions that I've gone back to what works for me. They could see for themselves that something didn't quite sit right when I started eating. They didn't want to see that roughie again, and that's fine with me. Of course I want to know more, but the only person who could tell me for sure has passed on. There are no more leads, no more signs. The only thing I could find was a curiosity among my mom's old letters. I'd missed it once because it was stuck in her collection of birthday cards, but there was a handwritten note from an anonymous sender. I told you not to breastfeed him. No name, no signature, just messy handwriting on a crumpled up piece of yellow paper. All in all, life goes on. I know I'll never really be like everyone else, but I think that's okay. I can pretend for as long as I need to. Maybe it's okay to be a tainted truffle pig, as long as I don't go looking for something to eat. But if I'm honest, sometimes I wonder, if I gave in fully and let myself run loose, if I consumed anything and everything, what would that make me? If I put it all into a single package, what would I become? Truffle pig, truffle pig. Look, but don't taste. It started small. I'd turn off the TV and see my wife standing at the edge of the hallway, half in shadow. No phone, no water, no reason to be there. She wasn't doing anything, just standing, watching. I asked if she needed something. She didn't answer, just turned around and walked away. I figured she couldn't sleep. But it kept happening. I'd find her in different places, always in the dark, standing in the bathroom doorway, crouched behind the kitchen counter, pressed into the corner of the guest room closet. She never said anything, never moved until I acknowledged her. Then she'd calmly walk away like nothing happened. One night I caught her staring into the turned-off television for nearly an hour, unmoving, barely blinking. I asked what she was doing. She just said, "I'm listening." I set up cameras, one in the hallway, one in the living room, one in the bedroom. First 2 nights, nothing. Third night, at 2:14 a.m., she stepped into the bedroom frame and stood at the foot of the bed, completely still. She didn't blink for 12 full minutes. Her mouth was slightly open. Then she left. I showed her the footage the next day. She stared at the screen in silence, then said, "I don't remember that." She didn't ask me to delete it. She just went into the bathroom and locked the door. Things escalated. I found blood on the hallway light switch, smears on the inside of the closet door, a towel soaked and folded under the sink. She claimed it wasn't hers. That was all she said. I woke up once to find her on the floor next to the bed, lying flat on her back, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Another night, she was under the kitchen table with cotton stuffed in her mouth. Her hands were shaking, but she didn't speak. When I tried to touch her, she flinched and backed into the corner like I was someone else. She started recording me. I didn't realize until I noticed a blinking red light behind the mirror. There were cameras in the vents, one inside a cereal box, another behind the toilet, aimed at the door. I confronted her. She didn't deny it. She said, "You weren't looking. Someone has to." I left for 3 days. When I came back, every mirror in the house was gone. Not covered, smashed, pulled off the walls. I found dirt on the floor like someone had been walking barefoot in circles. The hallway walls were scratched, not with words, but with long, jagged gouges. The kind people make when they panic and can't speak. That night, I woke up to her straddling my chest, not moving, just staring down at me. Her eyes were unfocused. Her face was pale. There was dried blood on her jaw. I couldn't tell if it was hers or mine. Her hands hovered above my throat but never touched me. Then she leaned in, like she was trying to hear something inside my body. In the smallest voice, she whispered, "You have to keep watching me. If you look away, I forget how to stop." I blinked. She was gone. The back door was open. The driveway was empty. And there was a hammer sitting next to the front door. It was still warm, still wet. She hasn't come back. Now I wake up to sounds that aren't there. Soft footsteps on carpet. A breath outside the bedroom door. Clicks in the hallway like someone testing the lock over and over. Last night I opened my phone and found 39 new videos I never took. They were all of me, eating, sleeping, brushing my teeth, all from behind. Always just far enough away that I never noticed. In the final video, I'm standing in the living room, looking down at something on the floor. The camera tilts and I see her body. Her face is split open, her arms bent backward, her mouth smiling. She's mouthing something over and over. I slowed it down frame by frame. The words are clear. You blinked. Airports make my skin crawl. Not anything about the building itself, but everything that comes with it. The constant squeaking of shoes against newly polished tile, the sound of crying babies, and the murmured apologies of their parents. And the smell, too. The airport in general was a mess of various scents, some pleasant, like freshly baked pretzels, and some not so pleasant, like the stench of body odor. It was a sensory nightmare, and I avoided it whenever I could. I was content with living the rest of my life in my little town, in the same country. However, fate had other plans. One of my friends, Julian, told my mom he was heading across the country for school. She saw it as the perfect opportunity to get me out of the house. I applied thinking my grades were too low to matter. But since God hates me, I got in. The plan was set. Julian would have already arrived at New York before I even left, meaning he would pick me up the moment my flight landed. Before I knew it, the day arrived and Mom was dropping me off at the airport. "It's time to grow up, Marin," Mom said, placing a hand on my shoulder. After one final hug and goodbye, she left, leaving me utterly alone, gazing up at the sterile edifice towering over me. Before I entered, the smell of sanitation spray and coffee wafted through the automatic doors. I checked my watch. 3:30 a.m. With a sigh, I entered the airport, my suitcase rolling behind me. I weaved through families, businessmen, and employees alike until I finally reached a respite. A large screen with some dated software, displaying flight times. Scanning the list, I found mine. Gate 5, 5 a.m., New York. I was granted a short amount of relief that was instantly dashed when I saw the flight below mine. Everything matched. Same gate, same flight, same time. Except for one thing. NWE, York. I frowned, squinting in the dim light. I couldn't be right. I knew the airport was old, but surely they wouldn't miss such an obvious mistake, right? It was something so trivial, but it bothered me to no end. I hobbled over to a worker and alerted her of the error. She just blinked twice before snorting. "First time?" she asked, and I nodded sheepishly. "Yeah, I thought so. Don't worry, I'm sure it's just a glitch. Nothing for you to worry about." Her tone was nonchalant, and I felt myself relax just a little bit. She was right. What was I worrying about? The technology looked like it was made in the 90s, and the airport was built in the 50s, and I was worried about a simple misspell. It was just the nerves talking, and yet, despite repeating the same mantra in my head countless times, I couldn't get rid of the feeling of dread looming over me. I sat at the terminal for around 20 minutes, just watching the people around me and thinking about nothing. Eventually, the PA system came on, and the automated voice announced my flight's boarding time. Now boarding Group A for Flight 5B to JFK International, departing from Gate 5. I looked up and saw a large gathering of people at a gate nearby. The crowd moved as one, shuffling forward like a line of ants. I grabbed my bag, took a deep breath, and walked into the mob. There was a woman who was taking the tickets. She wore the traditional uniform for most workers at the airport and wore a stoic expression. "Ticket?" she said, holding out a hand. I handed her mine, and she checked it. Her eyebrows furrowed for a moment. My heart stopped. Were there problems with my ticket? Was she going to ask me to step aside? She checked the screen again, then at me, before nodding once and stamping my ticket. I breathed a sigh of relief. The line progressed slowly until finally I was on the plane. It was not what I was expecting. I've heard many stories from my friends about airplanes being noisy, with people chatting away, or the sound of children playing with toys. It was dead silent. Not in a peaceful way, though. It was a foreboding silence, like the kind you'd expect from a funeral home. I was sat beside an older woman who, from what I could tell by my peripheral vision, was staring directly at the back of the seat in front of her. I know this doesn't sound weird, but when I say staring ahead, I mean she didn't move at all, not even to blink. The entire time. And it wasn't just her. It was everyone on the plane, too. I couldn't see much because the seats were in the way, but I could tell that they were all just sitting there not moving a muscle. Out of fear of drawing attention, I sat just as stiffly, my shoulders hunched. My other neighbor, a businessman, settled into his seat with a sigh. He took out his laptop and opened it, the screen lighting up the area around us in an unnatural glow. Now being able to compare what a normal person looked like on the plane to everyone else, the oddities of the others were even more apparent. As I redirected my attention back to my surroundings, my heart stopped. The older woman was now glaring at the businessman. Her gaze was intense, as if she were trying to burn holes in the side of his head. The passengers in front had also turned around and were watching him work. My breath quickened as I glanced around the cabin. Everyone was doing the same thing, watching this man type away on his laptop, who was completely oblivious to the attention he was getting. When he lifted his head to stretch and saw the dozens of eyes staring at him, his face paled. He didn't say anything, but I could see the panic in his eyes. He shifted in his chair, head darting from one passenger to another, before finally settling on me. I could see the question in his gaze, the silent plea for help, but I had no answers. I didn't know the rules, but at that moment I knew he had broken one. I just shrank in my seat, clamping my eyes shut. I didn't dare open them again, not even when the man's typing had stopped. All I could hear was the soft hum of the engine, nothing that indicated there was anything living or breathing on this plane. When I did open my eyes, the seat to my left was empty, not even an indent of where he sat. Now, I wasn't really the superstitious type, nor was I the type to believe in the supernatural or paranormal, but I also couldn't deny what had just happened before my eyes. Whatever the explanation was, something was seriously wrong. My mind was racing with questions, but I couldn't focus on any of them. All I could do was try to keep calm and remain still, careful not to let my breath get too loud or uneven, as it seemed like the smallest disturbance could draw unwanted attention to myself. Suddenly, the screens that were embedded into each seat turned on, and I just barely managed to fight off the urge to gasp. However, I did flinch, prompting my neighbor to turn her head ever so slightly towards me. I froze, stared straight forward, and waited until she had returned her gaze back to the screen. Once she had done so, I let out the breath I was holding in. A safety video started playing, which was strange since we had already taken off, but this was far from the strangest thing about the plane, so I didn't question it. It was a rather standard video, the type that you would see on any other commercial airline, with gray animated characters showing how to fasten the seatbelt. I followed along with the animation and strapped myself in. Click. All at once, however many people were on this plane also strapped themselves in with a unified click. I was off by a few milliseconds, but either those things didn't notice, or were too distracted by the few stragglers who were off by several seconds. Others like me and the businessman, I assumed. Once again, the attention of the old woman and assumedly all the other passengers were focused on the latecomers. I didn't need to see to know that they too disappeared without a trace, just like the man next to me. The video continued and text appeared on the screen. I couldn't even read it on account of how many letters were mixed up. It was like a keyboard mash, and I couldn't make out a single word. But somehow, I still got the general message. Follow the instructions or face the consequences. At that point, I was pretty sure the consequences were death, so for the rest of the video, I followed along with whatever it instructed, making sure I did everything exactly right, down to the second. But it just kept going, odd request after odd request, with no rhyme or reason. Press the call button 3 times. Hold your breath for 10 seconds. Close your eyes for 5. The list just went on. One by one, the remaining humans on the plane were picked off. A man coughed during the 10-second holding session. He was gone. Another person forgot to put their phones on silent. They were gone. A baby started wailing in the back while the mother tried desperately to calm it. I shut my eyes and willed the tears forming in them to stay, the lump in my throat to go down, and my heart to stop its rapid thumping. No rhythm that might set me apart. The crying ceased instantly. They were gone. Soon I was the only human left on the plane. I like to think that maybe someone else was as good as me at following the instructions, and maybe they made it through unscathed, but I had no way of knowing. After around an hour, the video finally ended, leaving me with nothing but the faint droning of the plane's engine. For hours I was slick with sweat, and my heart hammered at a pace a hair's breadth away from bursting. My lungs ached, desperate for a deep breath, and my muscles burned from tensing up. But I dared not move. The plane was just supposed to travel across the country, maybe an hour or two, but the flight had long passed that. Fear subsided, replaced with a numbing, all-consuming sense of monotony. The boredom was unbearable, so I tried to distract myself by counting the number of breaths I took, or how many times the lights above my head flickered. It was the only way to keep me sane. That boredom gave way to exhaustion, gradually wearing down my body until I felt like I could barely keep myself upright. My eyelids became heavy, and it became harder to focus on anything around me. I couldn't even tell if I was still on the same plane or not. Everything was starting to blur together. I concluded that, if I were to die, then having it happen in my sleep wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. So with that thought in mind, I let my eyes close and cast myself into the void of unconsciousness. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank you for choosing as your preferred airline. We hope that you choose to fly with us again. Local time is 9 p.m. and the temperature is a nice 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Please enjoy your visit to NWE York. I was jolted awake by a voice crackling through the speakers, announcing our arrival to New York. I had finally arrived. I forced the memories of the trip out of my head, forced myself to ignore the empty seats around me and the blank stares of the passengers, and walked out of the plane, rolling my luggage behind me. My heart nearly leaped out of my chest when I saw Julian's form standing in the lobby, holding a sign. I was nearly about to sprint towards him and give him the biggest hug of his life when I noticed something off about him. That big, dopey smile was gone. His face was a blank page, and his eyes didn't spark with life, even as they met mine. And the sign he was holding read, WLECOME to NWE York. MAIRN. It was a peaceful Friday morning, 4 a.m. I had awakened to my husband getting out of bed per usual. I just rolled over and fell back asleep for another hour. My alarm blared through my phone and I got out of bed, made breakfast and woke the twins, Millie and Milo. They ate, got dressed, fed the dog, and I took them to school. Everything was normal. Then went to work. At 1:50 I picked the kids up, told Milo to stop kicking the back of my seat as he giggled about how much fun he had at school, while Millie gasped and laughed at his special effects he added when describing it. We got home and I cut up strawberries for the kids as they did their homework. 6:30 rolled around and I waited for my husband Leo to walk through the door, but he didn't. Probably was running late. Milo watched TV as Millie drew pictures from the show they watched. As it got late, I worried where he was. "Mommy, where's Daddy?" Millie asked with her big hazel eyes staring up at me. "Work," I answered as I ruffled her hair. "Anyway, it's 8. Time for bed." "No," she shrieked, trying to run as I picked her up. "Milo, run!" She giggled as I tickled her. I made my way to the couch as Milo perked up. Not the tickle monster of bedtime," he yelled. I scooped him up too and carried them up to their rooms. "Bedtime, you two. PJs on and teeth brushed," I instructed. Our Rottweiler Bacon jumped up the stairs and wagged his tail as I walked over and pat his head. As I descended the stairs, Bacon trotted behind, still wagging his tail and panting. "Mom, I'm ready for my bedtime hugs," Milo called 15 minutes later. I sighed and got up from the couch. and went to his room while I heard Millie still brushing her teeth in the bathroom. Milo sat up in his bed with space sheets as he clutched onto an alien plush I had gotten him. "Mom, I have a question," he said with a grin on his face that let me know he had a plan. "What's up, my astronaut?" "Can me and Millie have a new and later bedtime?" Milo asked with the charming smile from his father. "Since me and her are big kids now." "You asked the same thing yesterday." I rolled my eyes and smiled. "You're 7. Maybe soon, bud. Now bedtime." I kissed his forehead and shut the light off before exiting. Mom, look, my teeth are all clean," Millie exclaimed as she ran up to me. "I'm like a shark." "I see. Well, come here. It's time for the little shark to sleep." I picked her up and booped her nose as I carried her to her bed. She thrashed in my arms, giggling as she flailed her arms around. I sat her down on her bed and pulled the blanket up onto her. "Mom, when's Dad coming back? He reads me my ocean books," Millie asked, crossing her arms. Soon. Now bedtime." I kissed her forehead and again turned out the light and left. I went downstairs and sat on the couch to watch some random movie. I began to feel scared as the hours ticked by without Leo coming home. Time passed by fast, and next thing I knew, I was waking up to my husband coming through the door staring at me before rushing up the stairs. I sat up to follow, but Bacon whimpered before I could stand. So I stayed on the couch. Next day. I yawned as the sunlight peeked through the blinds. I got up as Bacon followed me into the kitchen to start on some breakfast. As I got the stuff ready for pancakes, Bacon just plopped down in the corner of the kitchen, watching me like a hawk as I cooked. I guess the smell of scrambled eggs and pancakes woke the twins as they came down the steps and into the kitchen. Milo sneezed, which made me turn around to see him wrapped in a blanket, with a red nose and tired eyes. I served up 4 plates of breakfast and set it to the side as I went and gave Milo some medicine, despite his weak protests, before propping him on the couch with his plate and a fork. As I was about to head back to the kitchen, I heard a loud thud from the room. I guess Bacon heard it too as he appeared at my side. I started up the stairs before I heard a small whine from Bacon. I thought I stepped on his paw, but he just sat at the bottom, looking at me with pleading eyes. I continued up and heard him treading behind. I reached our bedroom and saw my husband just standing at the window, extremely still. I didn't think he was even breathing. Bacon growled and clamped his jaws on my shirt when I was about to go in. Leo turned to me with empty eyes and a smile so wide it made me uncomfortable. His hair was matted and he had bags under his eyes. He walked stiffly and went down the stairs without acknowledging me or Bacon. I followed as I felt something off. "Mommy?" I heard Milo scream in unison with Millie. I rushed down and saw my husband pulling on Millie's arm as she fought him with fear in her eyes. "Leo!" I shouted. He turned with the same creepy smile, and if anything it was wider. I ran between him and Millie and tried to pry his hand off her arm. He pushed me to the floor, and then I heard that time-freezing pop that filled the room with silence, then screaming as Millie cried. I shoved Leo to the wall. Millie scrambled away and Bacon barked at Leo with an aggressive tone I had never heard before from him. I ran to the corner where Millie sat sobbing, holding her shoulder. "Millie, are you okay?" I asked, panicking as I tried to hold her shoulder. Dislocated. I only knew since the memory of when I had dislocated mine one summer when I was younger. "Oh, Millie." I carried her to the car as Milo waddled behind, still wrapped in his blanket. Bacon cried and followed behind and jumped into the car. I rushed to urgent care. It was closer than the ER. A woman, maybe late 30s, sat at the desk typing away before she raised her focus to us. "Yes?" she asked in this emotionless tone. My daughter, she's dislocated her shoulder. I gasped slightly, holding Millie, who was still sobbing, out. Alright, I guess Ramirez can take you. She said dismissively before returning to typing on her computer. Just fill this out, she said, pushing a clipboard toward us. I filled it out, and a woman with gray hair pulled into a tight bun called for us. So what happened? She asked coldly. My daughter, her shoulder, it's dislocated. I choked. She raised an eyebrow and examined Millie. Nothing is wrong or out of order. She probably just fell. Kids are dramatic. It's dislocated. Did you even check? Ramirez rolled her eyes. She's fine. I did check. Don't coddle her, and maybe she wouldn't be crying like this over falling off a slide. My blood boiled as I took my daughter in my arms. I took her to my car and just rested my head on the steering wheel. I sighed. I felt it, Millie mumbled. I didn't know how to reply, so I just drove home while the kids slept. At home, I put them to bed for a nap. After, I berated my husband, yet with every word, his smile grew wider. This wasn't Leo. I grabbed a bag and packed my clothes. I need to stay at my mom's house, just for a little bit. While packing the kids' clothes, I heard a loud yelp from downstairs. Bacon came limping up the stairs and to my side trembling. A loud shriek boomed through the house as Bacon whimpered and pressed against my leg. I immediately threw the bag around my shoulder and grabbed the kids who carried their backpacks. As I crept down the stairs, I saw Leo on the floor, lying face down with a black goo spreading around his back. Bacon followed slowly. I opened the door slowly, carefully trying not to make a sound. Me and my kids, Bacon included, slipped into the dark night and speed-walked to the car. I put the twins in the car and told them to lay low just in case. I slipped Bacon into the trunk, and I guess he understood as he buried himself beneath the bags. I started the car and got in, but as I was about to close my door, I heard a deafening scream that didn't sound human, and saw my husband in the rearview mirror with his eyes fully white and blood and that strange black liquid dripping from his mouth, which was curled into a smile that I was sure would split his face in some way. He just stood by the door as I sped away. I drove and am at a rest stop as I am typing this. My kids crawled into the trunk and slept with Bacon. I'm just glad they're safe. I gave an anonymous tip to the police to check the house. So I'm tired. I'm just gonna sleep for a little bit. It started as a stupid accident. I was slicing chicken late at night, half watching some YouTube video when the knife slipped. A deep, clean slice across my left palm. I remember the sound before the pain, a sickening shk through skin and tendon. I swore, dropped the knife, and clutched my hand. Blood poured out fast. I wrapped it in a towel, called urgent care, and drove myself with one hand. They stitched it up, 10 tight black threads, and the doctor said it would heal fine. Come back in a week. Keep it clean. That was 3 weeks ago. It still hasn't closed. Worse, it's wider now. I kept it clean, washed it carefully, applied antibiotic cream, but every time I unwrapped the bandage, the wound looked wrong. Not infected, just open, like the skin had forgotten how to grow. I went back to urgent care. A different doctor this time. He looked at the wound, frowned. Strange. Did you reopen it? No, I said. It just won't close. He restitched it tighter this time and gave me stronger antibiotics. I followed every instruction. 5 days later, I woke up to my bed sheets sticky with blood. The stitches had burst. The wound looked hungry, the skin on either side pulling apart, like it wanted to gape open. The meat inside looked darker, not infected, different, like something was moving just below the surface. I didn't go back. Something about the way the doctors touched it, how quickly they backed away, how they exchanged glances, told me they didn't want to see it again either. Instead, I kept it covered, started filming it, watching it. Every night, same setup, lights off, infrared camera from my job. I do AV installs. Lens fixed on my hand while I slept. I didn't expect to catch anything. The first night, nothing happened. The second night, I twitched and turned, scratched at it in my sleep. The third night, something came out. It was just a frame or two. Had to go frame by frame to see it. A dark, thin shape almost like a spider leg poked out of the wound. Then another. Then they slipped back in. The video ended with me mumbling in my sleep and rolling over. I watched it 10 times. That wasn't a dream. The wound pulsed around the edges, like it welcomed whatever that was. I haven't been able to sleep since. I keep watching it, keep recording. Every night the thing comes out for longer. On Thursday I saw what looked like a face, small, featureless, gray. No eyes press up against the inside of my hand, like it was testing the boundary. It stared up at me from the inside of my own flesh. I've started hearing whispers at night. They come from inside the walls at first, but eventually they settle around me, like static building inside my skull. It's always the same voice. Let it open. Let me out. Sometimes I dream I'm holding hands with myself, except the other me is hollow, and something is shifting behind his eyes. In the dream he says, "You split the veil. We never forgot." I don't know what that means. I'm not religious, not spiritual, not into weird rituals or anything like that. I just cut my hand. That's all. But I think whatever I cut into wasn't just me. Last night the wound reached my wrist. It didn't bleed. It just unzipped, smooth and silent. Skin curled outward like pages peeling back. There's no pain anymore. Just a low vibration like my hand is a tuning fork or something old and far away. I saw bones, mine, but they were moving, rearranging, making room. For what, I don't know, but it's getting closer to the elbow now. I can't go to a hospital. I know they'll cut the arm off, and I think it'll keep growing anyway. It doesn't want out of my arm. It wants out of here. If anyone reads this, listen to me. Don't cut too deep. Don't let your wound stay, because once it gets out, I don't think it'll go. It all started in 5th grade when I was 11 years old. It was a pretty normal Monday afternoon after school. My older brother and I were raised by a single mother, so she was often working late into the evenings. We lived in rural northeast Tennessee, and our backyard bordered the Cherokee National Forest. It's a valley community deep in the mountains, and there's not much to do there that doesn't involve the outdoors. A creek ran through our yard, and my brother and I would follow the creek up the mountain. If you followed it long enough, probably about 1.5 miles, you came to the source, which was a natural spring coming right out of the rock. There was a little waterfall that fed into a big swimming hole that we would frequently visit to swim in the crystal clear water. Many days were spent splashing around, or turning over rocks and catching crawdads, frogs, and snakes. On this particular day, we decided to climb to the top of the waterfall, where the mouth of the spring was. We didn't normally go up there because we were afraid of falling, but I guess we were just extra adventurous that day. I was laying on my back in the shallow water ahead of the drop. Not floating, it was too shallow. Just laying on the smooth river rocks and looking at the clouds. My brother dared me to get closer to the edge. He called me a chicken and said I was too scared. He went and sat on the edge with the water flowing around him, looking down at the swimming hole. Well, I'm not a chicken, and I took his challenge. I went and sat right next to him on the ledge. I knew my brother was pretty mean, and I also knew he was probably going to pretend to push me to scare me. I decided I would flip the switch on him and jump off when he did. I don't know what possessed me to finally make the jump, but it's something we had talked about before. It wasn't a particularly tall waterfall, maybe 15 feet. Possibly less, because I was a lot shorter back then. It probably seemed much taller than it really was. The water, likewise, wasn't some rushing river rapids, just a calm little creek. Like I suspected, he gave me a light, playful little shove, and without thinking I let myself slip off. I knew the swimming hole was very deep. We'd never been able to reach the bottom by swimming down, and we'd done all manner of things to try and gauge the depth. We had tied a rock to a rope and thrown it in, but the rope completely disappeared in the water. I don't know exactly how long the rope was, but it had to have been at least 20 to 30 feet. So, I wasn't worried about hitting any rocks or breaking my bones at the bottom. I dove in plenty of times from the ground, and I'm a good swimmer. While I was falling, I felt so alive. I laughed and screamed as I fell, and it felt like some of the rides at Dollywood, where we'd gone on vacation to before. I hit the cold water and felt myself plummet. I went farther down than I'd ever gone before, and just as I began to swim back up to the top, I felt a force pulling on my legs. It was suction, and I started getting pulled back down. Immediately I knew what was happening. I'd heard stories of this before. There is another swimming hole similar to this called the Blue Hole in nearby Carter County. There are underwater caves that have sucked in swimmers, who dove too deeply that drowned and whose bodies were never recovered. It had never occurred to me before that there could be underwater caves here too, so when I felt myself getting sucked down, I panicked. I let out a scream, which is the worst thing I could have done, and watched my precious oxygen rise through the blue-green waters and massive air bubbles. I breathed in water and began choking, all while seeing the light at the top get farther and farther away. Then blackness. I was pulled into the cave, and I felt myself get smashed around algae-covered rocks. The cave grew so narrow that I could feel it squeezing my sides, and I knew that I was going to die. I remember my whole life flashing in front of my eyes like in the movies. I thought about my mom and became very sad that she would never find me. I thought about my brother, who's probably going to blame himself for my death, even though it was my decision to jump. I think that I died. Or at least, I lost consciousness. Because the next thing I remember, I was waking up on the sand, coughing up and puking creek water. My brother had saved me. Apparently he jumped in after me but couldn't find me. He says I was underwater for at least 5 minutes, until I suddenly resurfaced looking blue and cold. He said he thought I was dead, and he pulled me out and pressed on my chest and belly until I spit up water. I was shaking uncontrollably, and I was very cold despite the warm weather. It was September, but here in the south, we were still shaking off the 100-degree heat of August. My brother was leaning over me asking if I'm okay. I couldn't really talk because my throat and lungs were burning, but there was something off about him that I couldn't place. He looked me in the eyes, and that's when it hit me. His eyes were green, but they'd always been brown before. I know they were brown because I had green eyes like our mother, and she always said he had our father's eyes, who passed away when I was an infant. I was pretty weirded out by that, but in my current state it was the least of my concern. Wordlessly I got up and started walking downhill back towards our house, my brother following close behind me. He was begging me not to tell our mom that he pushed me, and even though I wanted to tell him this was my fault, that I decided to jump, I just couldn't find the energy to speak. I was dead tired, and I had this awful, squirmy feeling in my belly that made me want to cry. As we got closer and closer to the house, my eyes started watering up and I started feeling very sad. Like, hopelessly sad. Sad in a way an 11-year-old boy rarely ever feels. I also felt very afraid. Like something really bad was about to happen. When we got to the little clearing we used to enter the woods, I saw my mom's car parked in the gravel driveway and I began bawling. I took off running. I don't know why. My body was acting entirely on its own at that point. All I know is that I was screaming and crying like a toddler and running as fast as I could towards the house. To put it frankly, I had a bad day and now I wanted my mommy. I sprinted up to the door, leaving my brother far behind, and ran inside and immediately into the arms of my mother who was sitting on the couch. I buried my face in her lap, covering her jeans with wet sand and tears. She put her hands around me and squeezed, asking what's wrong. Through sobs and sniffles, I told her everything. I told her that my brother, from here referred to as James, had pretended to push me, but that I jumped on my own to scare him. I told her about sinking to the bottom and everything going black, and how James had rescued me. By the time my brother came inside, I had calmed down a lot, and was sat on the carpet watching Dragon Ball Z. My mom scolded us both and reminded us that we weren't supposed to be going up there to the swimming hole without an adult. She grounded my older brother, but decided my experience was punishment enough for me, so he was sent off to his room, while I got to keep watching TV. Later that night, my mom was helping me with some homework and kept giving me these weird looks. I asked her what was wrong, and finally she said, "Your eyes are green." She said it like it was a question. I said, "Duh, Mom, they've always been green." She said she swore they were brown. She even got out old pictures of me, and sure enough, I had brown eyes in all of the pictures. But they were green now. It's kind of funny because she was freaking out that my eyes were green while I was freaking out that they had never been brown. This caused a bit of a stir in the house. She called my grandma, who also confirmed I had always had brown eyes up until now. She made an appointment for me to go to the doctor the next week, and I guess I tried to just put it out of my mind until then. The next day I went to school like usual, and a few kids commented on my eyes and how they didn't realize they were green up until now. I was, and still am, of the opinion that they've always been green, and I insisted as much. Everything else was like a normal day until just before recess. There was an emergency staff meeting called. Our teacher returned from the meeting with the AV cart and started plugging up the TV. We all cheered because we thought we were watching a movie. But when she turned it on, we were watching the news. A plane had just flown into the World Trade Center in New York City. It was Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. I remember very vividly when the second plane hit on live TV. I remember the collective gasp of 25th graders seeing mass murder for the first time. I don't think that I fully understood really what was going on, because initially they were reporting it as an accident. But after the second plane, it was clear that this was an actual attack. Right away I thought, it must be the Soviets. To my knowledge, up to that point, the Soviet Union was still around and the Cold War was still raging. I even asked the teacher if she thought it was the Soviets, and she gave me a weird look and told the Soviet Union was gone, and had been gone since before I was born. I told her she was wrong. I distinctly remember learning about the Soviet Union in social studies class, and that it was still our country's greatest enemy. She shut me down pretty quickly, and I checked my social studies book, which confirmed what she said. The Soviets were gone. Now I can chalk that up to my dumb little kid brain just mixing things up. But what I'm positive I didn't mix up was the movie Rambo 3. I loved all 80s action movies growing up. RoboCop, Terminator, Aliens, and yes, Rambo. I'd seen them all, and I knew that Rambo 3 was my favorite. It involved Rambo going into space and destroying a Soviet space station that was able to launch nukes from orbit. But when I watched it now, it was about Rambo in Afghanistan, fighting the Soviets there. I thought that Afghanistan was actually part of the Soviet Union. I swore I remembered hearing about them taking it over in the 90s. I'm not exaggerating when I say I had to have watched Rambo 3 dozens of times by then. It played on TV all the time, and I'd always watched it if I could because it was my favorite. I can quote lines from the movie, and I very distinctly remember Rambo's sweaty face as he blew up the space station while he was still in it. He died at the end of the movie. I kept thinking, this new Rambo 3 must be a remake, or a prequel, or something. We didn't have the internet back then, so I couldn't just look it up, but I do remember asking about it at Blockbuster's video, and the guy there having no idea what I was talking about. He suggested I was thinking of the James Bond movie Moonraker, but no. I'd seen that one too, and this was different, and a lot better. I digress. They sent us all home from school early that day, and my mom had to leave work to come pick me and James up. She had stopped on the way to get lunch from a diner we often visited. She wanted to surprise us with a quick lunch. When we got home, she handed me my food, a club sandwich and fries. She called it my favorite, and was clearly expecting to see me get excited when I saw it. I was more of a chicken nuggets kind of kid, and had, to my knowledge, never eaten a club sandwich in my life. I told her I'd never had it before, and she told me to stop being silly because it's what I got every time. I tried it, and hated it. The toast was too dark, and cut the roof of my mouth. The fries were good, though. On TV, every single channel was showing news footage of the attack. James was still grounded, so going outside and finding something to do with him was off the table. I ended up just laying in my bed playing Pokemon Red on my Game Boy until I drifted off to sleep. I dreamed of pitch black cold water, and I felt like I was drowning again. I woke up, but I couldn't move. This was to be the first of many sleep paralysis episodes, which would continue to plague me up to this day. I didn't understand what was happening. All I knew was that I couldn't move anything besides my eyes. I tried to yell, but I couldn't make any noise. I started to feel very afraid, and the corners of my vision grew dark. I felt like I was falling, although I could see that I wasn't moving. It felt like I was being pulled out of my body, and I heard a rushing noise like water, like I was drowning. I looked to my right towards my bedroom door, and I saw someone peeking around the door frame. The person looked just like me, only he had brown eyes, like I did in the pictures. He looked furious. There was rage in his eyes that I can't describe. I'll never forget his one brown eye, the other side of his face hidden by the door frame, gazing at me with pure, spiteful hatred. It scared me so bad, and I began desperately trying to move. Eventually, I managed to move my leg enough that it hung off the bed, and this snapped me out of it. I blinked, and I was gone. It was over. I gasped as I sat up on the bed and immediately began to scream for my mom. I probably sound like a huge baby, having cried for my mommy twice in this story already. But give me a break. I was 11. Mom consoled me and assured me it was just a nightmare. I slept with her that night because I was too afraid to be alone. I know I wasn't asleep. It would be years later, when we got the internet, after dozens of episodes, that I finally learned what sleep paralysis was. After that day, life just kind of went on like usual. I went to the doctor and my mom asked about my eyes. He told her that they probably just look brown in the old pictures due to the light or the camera, because there's no way my eyes would have just changed color like that out of the blue. My mom brought up that on my birth certificate it says that I have brown eyes. Doctor couldn't explain that, and I honestly don't think he even believed her. My mom never truly accepted this, but decided to let the matter rest. After all, there was nothing to be done about it anyway. We all just took it as one of those weird things that nobody can explain. Fast forward a few years to my freshman year of high school. Over the years, I had pretty regular sleep paralysis episodes, but I still didn't fully understand it. I had become extremely religious. My family are Orthodox Christians, and our priest was the only adult in my life that took me seriously when I described my sleep paralysis episodes. I told him that I thought I was being possessed when it happened, because that's what it felt like. It felt like my soul was being pulled out of my body. Well, our priest, Father Tikhon, didn't want to scare me. It was clear he was also concerned that I was experiencing could be demonic in nature. I don't think that I believe that now. Not quite, but at the same time, an adult validating my fears and offering solutions was a godsend. No pun intended. He told me when it happens to repeat the prayer we use with our prayer ropes, sort of like a Catholic rosary. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy upon me, a sinner. So that's what I did. Every time it would happen, I would say in my head, since I couldn't speak, the prayer over and over until it stopped. This seemed to work, and as long as I said the prayer, I didn't see the version of me with the brown eyes. That version never grew up, by the way. He remained 11 as I continued to get older. The attacks were much shorter and less scary. Eventually, after I'd been through it hundreds of times, I wasn't even really scared by it anymore. I just said my prayers, and that was that. I followed the full Orthodox prayer schedule. For the Orthodox reading this, you know what a task that can be. I said the full Trisagion, plus all the extra morning prayers in the little red prayer book. If you know, you know. Then the midday prayers, and finally the nighttime prayers. If you recite all of them out of the book, word for word, that comes out to about an hour of prayer each time. So 3 hours of prayer a day that way. Plus I would do my prayer rope at least once per day, which was 100 knots. So 100 times every day. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy upon me, a sinner. When I slipped and didn't say my prayers, I would have a bad episode. This enforced my belief that something demonic, or at least supernatural, was happening. One such day, I hadn't said my midday prayers or done my prayer rope. I was too busy focusing on a crush I had on a girl at school. I'd asked her out, and she said no. I was so upset that I let my prayers slip. I took a nap when I got home from school, not remembering my prayers at all, just thinking about the girl. I woke up from 3 loud, distinct knocks on my headboard. Bang, bang, bang. Very loud and clear. When I woke up, I was staring the child version of me in the face. The big brown eyes staring into my skull with pure venom. Immediately I started reciting the prayer in my head. Lord Jesus Christ. What? I couldn't remember. What was the next word? Lord Jesus Christ, Son of... Come on. Lord Jesus... He was slowly putting his face closer and closer to mine. His eyes locked onto me. Every time I caught his gaze, my mind would blank, and I couldn't say the words. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. I stuttered. In my brain I stuttered. Something I didn't even think was possible. I kept trying to say it in my mind, but I just couldn't get it out. Now he was right up against my face, his little cold nose pressed against mine. I could smell his breath, and it smelled like creek water. He said without moving his lips, "He doesn't care about you anymore." I shut my eyes tight. I could still feel and smell him. Jesus Christ, Son of God. I heard laughing. I opened my eyes and he was still staring me down, still furious looking. His mouth was open, but his lips weren't moving. My ears became very hot, and I could hear awful laughter all around me. Jesus Christ, Son of God, God, have... I was trying to choke it out. Almost there. Don't look at him. I heard the boy's voice again. He's not listening. Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy. I was stopped by the feeling of cold water rushing over my face. I opened my eyes and my younger self had a dirty-looking bottle of creek water. He was pouring it over me, choking me, drowning me. I screamed verbally, gurgling through the water. I screamed, "Oh God, please save me." And it was over. I sat up in a gasp like I always do and caught my breath. I dropped to my knees on the floor and pulled the prayer rope from around my neck. I started chanting and I completed the rope twice before I stopped. When I put the rope away, I realized that my bed was wet. I went over to the neighbor's house and stayed there until my mom and brother got home later that day. I didn't bother telling them about it because at this point, they didn't believe me anymore about the sleep paralysis. They were convinced they were just normal nightmares. Tennessee in the early 2000s, at least where I lived, didn't have stellar mental health care. Therapists were something that rich people had, not families like ours. I didn't have anyone to talk to about it besides my priest. To his credit, he advocated for me. He tried to talk to my mom about a potential exorcism. While my mom was an Orthodox Christian, she wasn't superstitious, and for her, it was more of a cultural thing than an actually supernatural one. She wouldn't let him do the exorcism, but agreed to let him bless our house, which is normally only done once per year. This blessing made me feel safer, but it didn't stop the attacks. Nothing as bad as that one would happen for a long time, so things kind of went back to normal. I'd have an attack, say my prayers, and get through it. It always felt like it set me apart from the rest of my family. They were all normal, happy people. Meanwhile, 2 to 3 times a week, I believed I was embroiled in spiritual warfare with my very soul. It continued like that for another 2 years, until when I was a junior I discovered something that stopped the attacks even better than religion. Drugs. I tried smoking pot for the first time with my friends and one of their older brothers. I loved it immediately. I felt so free and light and happy and giggly and hungry. That night when I slept, I didn't dream. No nightmares, no sleep paralysis, nothing. I hadn't slept like that in years, not since the incident at the swimming hole. By now, we didn't live in the sticks anymore. We'd moved into town and were living in a government housing project. The call center my mom worked at had closed down, and now she worked at McDonald's trying her best to make ends meet. We couldn't afford the house I grew up in anymore, so we had to move. I missed living in the country, but being in the town allowed me a lot of freedom I never had before. I could walk to my friends' houses and would regularly stop on the way home from school to hang out. I started smoking pot every chance I got because I knew they kept the attacks at bay. My brother and I had figured out how to connect to a neighbor's Wi-Fi, and so we had reliable internet for the first time. He showed me how to pirate movies and music, and I started downloading them, burning them to discs and selling them at school for a few dollars a pop. I used this money to buy pot, which I would secretly smoke every night before bed. I'm not lying when I say I never felt better. Getting a full night's sleep every night changed everything for me. Ironically, my grades actually improved once I became a certified pothead. Life kept going, and between pot, my goofball friends, and my desperate attempts to get a girl to like me, I fell away from the church. I gradually stopped my 3 hours of daily prayer, and eventually stopped going to church altogether. Life was good. I felt like a normal kid for the first time in years. I graduated high school and got my first job, and eventually my own apartment, which I rented with 2 of my friends. However, all good things must come to an end. And one day my weed dealer stopped answering his phone. Found out through the grapevine that he'd been arrested. I wouldn't be getting any weed anytime soon. It took about a month, but once all the THC was gone from my system, the nightmares came back. They soon turned to sleep paralysis, and just like that I was praying again. Only this time it didn't work. It didn't stop the attacks. I would have nightmares where the kid version of me would talk to me. He would tell me that God has abandoned me because I abandoned him. He said that when I prayed, God would simply laugh and turn away from me. He said that one day he would kill me. I believe him because it still happens. He's never poured the water on me like he did that one day, but the choking continues. When it happens, I can't breathe. I can't think. I feel like I'm being sucked from my body and going somewhere far away, somewhere dark, cold, and wet. I know that this is how I'm going to die. I still pray, I struggle, I fight, and I get through it each time. Eventually I got married. Now I don't sleep alone much anymore, and when I have my attacks, my wife wakes me up. She can hear me softly crying out in my sleep. Sometimes when I'm home alone, I will suddenly feel as though all the energy is drained out of me and I become very, very tired out of nowhere. I'll want to lay down for a nap, but I know in these times that if I do, I will assuredly have an attack, and I'm deathly afraid that one day I won't wake up from it. Sometimes I accidentally fall asleep on the couch, and each time it gets harder and harder to get myself out of it. He visits me every time. He wants me dead. More than dead. He wants my actual soul to be destroyed. I believe that he wants my soul gone, so that he can inhabit my body and pick up where he left off. I believe that when I drowned that day, I entered an alternate universe and took his place, and he wants his life back. I don't know what will happen if he ever succeeds. I don't know what he will do to my wife or my friends. I hope I never have to find out. I have a plan. This weekend, I'm going to go back to my childhood home. I'm going to follow the creek up the mountain, and I'm going to jump off that waterfall again. I'm either going to die, or I'm going to wake back up where I belong, with my brother and his brown eyes. And maybe when I do, the brown-eyed version of me will wake up to see his brother's green eyes, looking back at him. Matthew 7:15. Sat in my attic typing this post, and I've cried all the tears I can cry. I feel sick. I feel terrified. He's downstairs right now, crawling around the house on all fours. I need advice. I need help. Dale was so funny. His smile was so infectious. His laugh that could brighten even the darkest of days. All of this complemented by his gorgeous green eyes and his thick brown hair. He loved the outdoors too, ever since we were knee-high childhood friends. Dale was always the one out from sunrise to sunset, racing around on his bike with the rest of the kids from the neighborhood. Water fights in the summer, snowball fights in the winter. As we both got older into our adolescence, he consistently had a sports meet to attend or some practice he was late for, always armed with a racket, a ball, or even a frisbee in his ultimate frisbee phase. Then we began dating right after university. His degree was in sports science, naturally, and mine was in psychology. When we ended up attending universities on opposite sides of the country, I thought mine and Dale's paths permanently split, going in different directions that the inevitability of time ensures with many friendships. Not us, though. I'd just turned 21. He was 22. And he sent me a message on July 24th. The date is significant, as 2 days prior was my birthday. Dale always jokes how he innocently got the dates mixed up. I have my suspicions he tactically waited to ensure his message didn't get the generic "thanks, means a lot" reply that I was pumping out to all the other friends, sending me birthday wishes after Facebook had prompted them to. Dale thought he was so clever. I suppose it did work. To this day, he keeps up the recurring joke that my true birthday is July 24th. He'll put out his social media posts then. He circles that date on calendars and annotates it with a big Ellie's birthday. Hell, one year he even organized a birthday shout out on the radio for me on the 24th. Anyway, I'm rambling. After he slid into my DMs, we began dating. We both fortunately bagged some pretty decent jobs in Edinburgh, Scotland. I work as a criminal profiler and him as a PE teacher. Edinburgh was the natural pick. We both love the old Scottish folklore, tales of kelpies and sprites, and of course the Loch Ness Monster. Scotland has some of the best camping laws in the world. If you can walk around there, you can essentially camp there. The public have ramblers' rights, with mountains, moors, and forests all within legality to explore and camp. Naturally, dating the man I do, a camping trip within our first couple of months living here was a must. We waited for the warm, or as much as Scotland can offer, May weather, and began planning our route. We'd leave Edinburgh and head west, before driving north. This would take us directly to Galloway Forest, the biggest in the country, spanning over 300 miles. The forest is also a dark sky region, with the country limiting the light in this area to provide more starry nights. This of course creates some beautiful, but dark nights. This might be one of the reasons for the countless stories of mythical creatures and silly monsters that spew out of the region. We disregard this. Dale already had all the camping gear, a tent for us to share, a blow-up mattress, 2 sleeping bags, camp chairs. I wasn't joking when I said my man lived for the outdoors. I looked at myself in the mirror and smiled, my reflection smiling back. Life really does have its way of working itself out. I head out the door with my reflection mirroring my behavior. I got you a wee surprise as well, my love, he said with a grin on his face as he loaded the second chair into the back of the car. And what would that be? Well, you'll just have to wait and see, won't you? I smiled and gently punched his arm jokingly. He knew I hated surprises. The drive there was long, but the walk after we parked the car up was even longer. Dale insisted on going as deep into the woods as we could, away from the pesky civilization he constantly claimed was such a nuisance. We finally settled on a small clearing amongst the towering oak trees that surrounded us for miles. Dale sat his bag down immediately, unloading the equipment we'd hauled for miles. I also took a seat, but purely to admire the scenery, the peace, the silence. The silence that was broken by a deafening scream. The scream ripped through the air like a knife through butter, the acoustics of the forest making it seem endless, echoing around, making its point of origin or its proximity to us undeterminable. The only sound I could compare it to would be nails on a chalkboard, but with the volume of a sonic boom. I stood up from my perch on the floor immediately, looking at Dale in horror. I could see the slight panic on his face too, a juxtaposition of his typical calmness in stressful situations. Babe, what was that? I asked him with a mix of fear and anger. He paused, his eyes still scanning around the trees surrounding us hopelessly. I'm sure maybe a fox, or something. A fox? Dale, that sound did not come from a fox. It could be some sort of big cat. I mean, I read reports that they get brought over illegally and let out into the wild. I mean, in certain conditions they can. You're telling me we could be sharing the woods with a mountain lion in Scotland? Dale met my eyes, giving me a look of uncertainty. Dale, we're leaving. We can't. Sun sets in less than 45 minutes. The walk back to anywhere remotely civilized will take at least 2 hours. We can't do the walk in the dark. That'd be far more dangerous than anything that could have produced that sound. I looked at him with my mouth agape. I could see the uncertainty in his eyes, but he corrected this quickly. his concern easing and a wry smile beginning to break the tension. "You'll be all right, El. You were with me after all." I couldn't help but giggle. We soon forgot about the scream. After we set up the tent and got a small fire going, it soon began to get dark. We took this as our sign to crack open the bottle of wine we'd brought with us. Dale pulled the red from his bag along with 2 wine glasses. He filled them up and handed me mine. "I propose a toast," he said gallantly, "to my gorgeous Elle, who without whom I don't know what I would do, to this beautiful forest we found ourselves at the heart of, and to God." "Cheers, my love," I replied, clinking our glasses together. After that, we just chatted the night away, watching the fire dance in front of us, holding hands, listening to the crackle of the kindling. "Think we're gonna need a wee top-up on firewood," Dale said. "Okay, babe, be careful." He rose from his perch on the log and marched off into the forest, a slight sway in his step from the alcohol. I giggled like a little girl, so in love, so happy at that moment. We went beyond the tree line into the darkness, and I heard him begin to break branches. Snap, 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 crack. An unusually loud, slightly different crack came from the darkness. I heard Dale gasp and then nothing. "Babe?" I said as I got up. "Babe?" I shouted with more urgency, running into the trees. I was immediately engulfed by darkness. The illumination of the campfire soon shrouded out by the trees. I kept shouting Dale's name, in a panic, scouring the dark forest floor as best as I could, searching for his potentially incapacitated body. The tears began to roll down my face, and my heart pounded through my chest as every second that passed with no sign of him. Then I heard it. "El?" It was just a whisper, one that could have been mistaken for a gust of wind amongst the trees, but my heightened senses in this stressful environment urged me to pursue it. I looked in the direction I heard the whisper from. Up. I swore up and down it came from above me, in the dark branches of the trees that covered me from the night sky. As my eyes adjusted more to the dark, I saw it, the silhouette of a figure up in the trees. It looked to be reaching towards me, reaching out its hand, and then... "Ellie," a voice called from back at the campsite. "Dale?" I cried. I raced back to the campsite and saw Dale stood there. I ran up and embraced him, jumping into his arms with relief. "You're freezing," I told him, pulling my arms back away from his ice-cold skin. "Where's the firewood? How are you gonna warm up now?" I continued. "Something dropped down from the trees. A bat, maybe," Dale replied. I thought back to the silhouette I'd seen in the tree, much larger than a bat. I kept it to myself, though, not wanting to stress Dale more. "I think we'll just go to sleep now anyway. I don't really want to go back out there." "Oh, okay, my love. Let me get ready for bed." I began getting changed in the tent, watching as Dale just looked out into the woods. He was frozen, just staring into the same spot in the tree line he'd entered before, staring into the same dark abyss. "Are you coming to bed, babe?" I called. "Yes." "All right then," I thought. He was probably just spooked. We got wrapped up in our sleeping bags in silence, before turning off the small light illuminating the tent. I nodded off fairly fast, considering the circumstances. That's when it happened. Something woke me. I'm not sure what, or at what time, but my body instantly felt in a state of panic. I knew something was watching me. I opened my eyes ever so slightly, my long eyelashes covering the small slither of pupil in between my eyelids, enough to see without giving away that I was awake. Dale was sat up still in the dark. His legs were crossed and up very high, his knees uncomfortably close to his chest. His eyes were wide open, wider than I'd ever seen them, and he was staring right at me. My palms immediately started sweating and my heart raced once again. He was looking at me like some piece of meat. Not blinking, no discernible emotion, just staring. I closed my eyes again, not moving, paralyzed in fear. I pretended to start waking up, stretching my arms. I heard his sleeping bag rustle, and when I turned over, he was sleeping again. I was stunned, lying there awake for the rest of the night until the comfort of the sunrise saved me. The next morning, Dale said he wasn't feeling well and wanted to go home. Odd. The man spends every minute of his life outdoors and all of a sudden wants to pack up and leave. I didn't argue, instead beginning to pack up the stuff with him. The walk back to the car was silent, so awkward. Occasionally I'd turn around to catch Dale lagging behind, staring at me again. Every time he saw me look, he'd avert his gaze to somewhere else. Once we got back in the car, Dale complained he was too tired to drive, that he just wanted to rest in the back. I reluctantly agreed. He knew how much I hated long drives, but I suppose if he wasn't feeling well, I should probably cater to him. "What's wrong?" I asked him. "I just want to get out of the sun. I hate being outdoors," he replied. This was odd. I hate being outdoors. He must really not be feeling well. The whole drive he maintained his newfound unnerving stare. I could feel it now, burning into the back of my head. I could almost sense a feeling of danger. Every muscle in my body screamed at me for the entire car ride to pull over and run, but I didn't. And nothing happened. Yet. We got back this morning, with Dale taking himself off to bed almost immediately. I sat downstairs worrying about him. What happened to him out in the woods? Did he really just get ill? Why has he been staring so much? I decided I had to confront him. I marched up the stairs and placed my hand on the doorknob, preparing myself to open it, but I heard him scurry on the other side, as if he was hurriedly getting out of a compromising position. I opened the door to see Dale sat on the floor, his legs crossed and his knees uncomfortably close to his body once again. "Is everything okay, Ellie?" he asked. "What's going on with you? You've been acting so strange since the camping trip. Did I say something? Babe, please just be honest with me." "I'm fine, babe. I'm just tired." He smiled and chuckled. I looked at him closely. His smile was so hideous. His teeth stained a muddy brown. His laugh that made me feel nauseous with fear and intimidation. All of this exacerbated by his widened pale blue eyes. Pale blue eyes. It was also at this moment I noticed he'd drawn all of the curtains closed to keep out the sun, an apparent hatred of the outdoors that my man loved so much. "When's my birthday, Dale?" I asked. His smile faded. His stare widened. "July 24th, of course." "My real birthday," I replied, noticing his eyes locked onto the calendar on the wall behind me. "That is your real birthday. It says it on the wall behind you. Ellie's birthday. You are Ellie." My heart dropped and a pit of terror opened up in my stomach. I felt tears begin to well in my eyes and a fear so primal I didn't know what to do. That man was not my boyfriend. Dale noticed my realization and stood to his feet in a singular, smooth, almost impossible motion. I looked at what he was holding, grasping a handful of dirt from the now empty plant pot on the bedside table. He maintained his stare, never breaking eye contact, as he slowly raised the dirt to his mouth, before hurriedly shoving it in there. He munched on it ferociously, like a ravenous beast, swallowing it without even a glimpse of discomfort. He licked the dirt surrounding his lips, savoring every morsel. "Go to the attic," he pointed up. The tears were now streaming down my face. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words almost refused to come out. I slowly turned and obliged, feeling his stare piercing the back of my head as I pulled down the stairs to the dark attic and climbed up. I barely reached the top when I felt them slam behind me. Darkness. I sat there for a moment, just thinking about what had transpired. Had I really just seen that? I felt a buzz in my pocket. Oh my god, my phone. I hurriedly reached my trembling hands into my pocket, pulling it out, the screen illuminated by a Snapchat notification. I had Wi-Fi, but this attic had no signal. I raced to type a Snapchat message to one of my friends, loading the app up, the waiting time taking almost an eternity. The message was from Grace, my best friend. I opened the chat. Grace. LWTF. That's so horrible. You can be such a B-word sometimes. What? What was she even referring to? I scrolled to the message above that. A voice message sent only 3 minutes ago. Sent from me. My work phone's downstairs. Logged into Snapchat too. But what could it be? I tapped the message, and the sound that played was the worst sound I could imagine. Worse than that scream the other night. The sound of my own voice. I don't even want to repeat the things said on that voice message. And before I even had a chance to justify myself, Grace had blocked me. That was when I noticed more and more of these messages being sent. Sent to all my friends, to my work colleagues. It was only when I put my ear to the floor of the basement that I heard him, or should I call him it, recording these messages with an uncanny resemblance of my voice. That brings me here. I can hear it moving furniture around the house. I can hear it scuttling around. By the sounds of it, on all fours. I'm at a loss. I don't know what to do. I'm terrified for my life, for Dale's life, for all of yours. I turned my head to the mountain of boxes in the attic. Posters, paintings, and anonymous stuff sprawling out of them. There was one in particular that caught my eye. One of Dale's posters, labeled with a biblical passage. One that seemed to taunt me. Matthew 7:15. Beware of false prophets, who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves.